Kappa.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm Zach Clark, and today we're going to be talking about 8-Cast. So 8-Cast is one of Legacy's newest decks. Really just one of the most dynamic decks in the format. Fast, efficient, cheats on mana, everything that Legacy loves. So let's check it out. Right, so let's talk about some of the cards that make this deck the deck to play, right? You've got, obviously, Thought Monitor, Thought Cast. Great cards. They're obviously why the deck is named 8-Cast, because you're basically casting Thought Cast 8 times in this deck. Netting cards, cheating on mana, and just ultimately burying your opponent in a lot of artifacts and artifact triggers. So let's talk about some of the creatures in this deck. KAPPA Cannoneer, Emry, Lurker in the Lock, and Sign Master Thopterist, and also Thought Monitor, right? Those are your main creatures. Your main threats in this deck are basically just ways to power out cheap, efficient creatures, and basically you're cheating on mana costs with most of this stuff. Now, the reason why this deck really succeeds is because of Urza Saga. Modern Horizons 2 created this monster card that basically puts 6 power right onto the board for you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Some of the other great cards in this deck are obviously the Baubles, Mishra, and Urza. And then also your Lotus Petals, Mox Opals. The whole deck is almost free. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, on the early turns, there's a couple of things you're going to want to look for. If your hand has a Soul Land, like Ancient Tomb, or happens to have a Lotus Petal, or you can produce 2 mana on the first turn. That's what we're looking for here. If you can produce 2 mana on the first turn, and you have a Chalice of the Void, you probably just want to slam Chalice of the Void on 1. That shuts off so many decks in the format. Delver has a real problem with dealing with Chalice of the Void. Most of its spells cost 1 mana. So, that's one way to just, whoops, I auto-win against some decks. Now, that's not always going to happen. So, what you want to do is look at your hand. A lot of times you're going to see cards like Emry and a couple of artifacts, and you'll notice that you can actually cast Emry for 1 mana. This puts a bunch of stuff into your yard, not to mention it turns your Lotus Petals into basically Moxes. So, you're able to get a Lotus Petal back every turn, or you're able to get a Bauble back every turn and draw extra cards every turn. One of the main reasons why this deck is so good is because you're able to basically draw extra cards every single turn if you have Emry on the board. Right, let's talk about the mid-game. KAPPA Cannoneer is one of the newest cards to come out in this deck. In fact, it is the newest card to come out in this deck. The card comes down as a 6 mana 5/5 because it sees itself as it hits the board. One of the coolest parts about this card is that it's got Ward 4, making it basically hexproof, and its ability to reduce its mana cost using Improvise. You have a ton of mana rocks in the deck for Improvise. All of your Baubles, even your Chalice of the Void, and even your constructs that are coming off of Urza Saga. Let's talk about Urza Saga. So, if you're lucky, you have a Soul Land and Urza Saga on turn 1. Right? Play your Urza Saga, pass. Turn 2, play your Soul Land, make a construct, pass. On turn 3, you untap, put the trigger for the Saga on the stack, tap Urza Saga and the Soul Land, create yet another construct, and then go get a Shadow Spear. Now on the next turn, so you already got 2 3/3s on the board, you probably already have a bunch of other 0 mana artifacts on the board, so you probably have between 3/3 and 6/6, 2 3/3s and 6/6s. All for just 1 land. Ridiculous, right? Now, Shadow Spear, you've been spending all this life using your Ancient Tomb. Shadow Spear actually recoups that life total that you get, and against a lot of decks, a 5/5 with Trample and Lifelink is just an impossible thing to deal with. Not to mention, as these cards get bigger and bigger as the board goes on. So, between Urza Saga just being its own army, and KAPPA Cannoneer, you have these unstoppable threats, especially with the fact that the Cannoneer is able to be played as an unblockable creature. Right, let's talk about shutting the door. One of the great things about this deck is you actually do have a long game. In Emry, Lurker in the Lock, you're able to tap Emry and get artifacts back into play, which is amazing. The versatility on this card alone is well worth the 1 mana you're probably going to be paying to bring it into play. Also, because you're playing Psy and because you're playing Emry, you're able to get additional triggers onto your KAPPA Cannoneer, and you're able to play Otawara, the Soaring Sky, for basically only 2 mana. Really added a lot of versatility to this deck. So basically, whenever your opponent is playing like a Show and Tell deck, a Reanimator deck, Otawara just solves that problem for you immediately. Let's talk about sideboarding. You're playing cards like Brazen Borrower, Fairy Macabre. Brazen Borrower does the same thing as Otawara, right? And it can get in as a threat. It also gets rid of your opponent's hard strategies against Artifact Hate. There's not a lot out there, but killing a Null Rod might actually be effective for you every now and again, or at least returning it to your opponent's hand. Then you have Crucible Worlds, able to get your Otawaras back, obviously, right? But being able to go back and get extra value out of an Urza Saga is just bonkers. So there are a lot of decks that are going to be playing Wastelands and stuff like that. Sure, you're going to want to bring it in against those, but for decks that you know that you're going to be playing a longer game against, like Miracles, the Crucible of the Worlds is great there too. Dismember, obviously. Fairy Macabre, you're going to be able to deal with your opponent's graveyard strategies. Flusterstorm, Force Negation. The deck already plays 4 Force of Will. You're going to be playing 4 Force Negation as well to just deal with combo decks. Standard stuff there. You can play 1 Hull Breacher if you think that you're playing against an opponent who's playing the Day Breacher style decks. Pithing Needle, an all-purpose card, and then Soul Guide Lantern. Soul Guide Lantern allows you to put a hard stop to whatever shenanigans is going on with graveyard decks, and then in that interim, you should be able to kill them before they can go off again. 8-Cast is one of the most ridiculous decks in the format. You're cheating on mana, you're drawing extra cards, you're doing everything you want to be doing in Legacy. You should definitely check it out. Good luck.
Hey, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out this other video, and if you can, please support us on Patreon.com.